listeners joining us from different parts of the world. My name is David Amadioana, and this is Africa in Perspective, Conversations with David. Today, my guest is joining me all the way from Harare, Zimbabwe. His name is Andrew Makoni, and he is the current board chairperson for the Zimbabwe Election Support Network. He also serves as the foundation chair for the Rotary Club of Harare City and as a board member in a number of companies and private voluntary organizations. He holds a Bachelor of Law degree from the University of Zimbabwe and a Master of Business Administration from the same university. He majors in corporate law, business rescue, and human rights. He is a partner of Mbizo, Muchadehama, and Makoni Legal Practitioners, a Harare-based law firm. Ladies and gentlemen, our viewers, the topic under discussion today is challenges and opportunities unpacking electoral conduct in Zimbabwe ahead of the 2023 elections. Before we begin our conversation today, let me give our highly esteemed guest an opportunity, of course, to give us his opening remarks. Mr. Andrew Makoni, welcome to Africa in Perspective, Conversations with David.
Thank you very much, David, for having me and inviting me to speak about the electoral environment as Zimbabwe moves closer to the 2023 harmonized elections, which are most likely going to take place in July or August of 2023. Our elections are timed in such a way that they occur not more than 30 days after the expiry of a 5-year term of parliament. The time which is left at the moment is very, very limited. That is why we must start, conversing about elections. If we have not done so already, it is therefore important that we're having this conversation today, David.
Thank you so much. Otherwise, how are you doing? How's Harare? How's Zimbabwe this morning?
Zimbabwe is fine. We are doing very well. It's cold, but we take every day as it comes. In this COVID environment, the numbers are getting up once again. But we hope that sooner we will ride this wave.
Indeed. Well, I have a couple of questions for you. It has been argued that since 2000, Zimbabwe's elections have been fundamentally problematic. What do you reckon to be the challenges and opportunities embroidered in the conduct of Zimbabwe elections?
Well, David, since 2000, we have had contested elections with perceived winners claiming victory and those who lose or are perceived to have lost elections challenging the results. The results of the presidential election in 2002 were challenged. 20 years later, the jury is still out. The challenger, Morgan Tsvangirai, passed on before even knowing the outcome of his petition. And I also believe that the Chief Justice who presided over that matter also passed on before judgment was handed down. Similarly, in 2008, presidential elections were also contested, leading to a runoff elections, which ended up being a one-man horse race, as we all know, following the withdrawal of Morgan Tsvangirai.
Yes.
The 2013 presidential elections were also contested, and so were the 2018 presidential elections, which we all witnessed as live broadcasting was happening during the proceedings. Alongside this contest were also contested parliamentary elections with a record over 100 petitions being filed in 2008 and several in 2013, as well as in 2018. If you also recall, in the first elections in 2001, parliamentary elections, again, there were several such challenges. So we have had contested elections since 2000. This is quite abnormal. It shows that there's something really which is fundamentally wrong with the way we run our elections. Observers across the divide have always almost agreed on the fundamental problems bedeviling our elections here in Zimbabwe. And chief among them is a flawed electoral system, which negates principles for the conduct of democratic democratic elections. Some of the challenges also include a perceived lack of independence of the election management board, ZEC, which is pegged by employees who were working in the security sector, which is linked to the ruling party. So that is a huge challenge which needs to be looked into as well. And we also talk of the uneven playing field, and equal access to the media, particularly the public broadcaster, and the public newspapers, the abuse of state resources, the banning of public gatherings of political parties by the disturbing trend of violence and intimidation, which is littered all over in our elections we have had since 2000. We have also seen a curtailment of freedom of assembly and association, many arrests, particularly of those belonging to opposition political parties and human rights defenders. We have always had the so-called no-go areas, Maramba, Fungwe, and such other areas where other political parties are not free to conduct electoral activities there. They cannot campaign freely there. They can't even deploy election agents there. And it is also a challenge even deploying observers, our ZESN observers in such areas. So those are some of the challenges that we've experienced over the past elections, which really are a cause of concern.
Definitely. What about, there must be some opportunities. Are there any opportunities in there?
Well, yeah, indeed there are opportunities. But before maybe I speak about opportunities, I must also say something about the dispute resolution mechanism, which is also a cause of concern. We lack a robust dispute resolution mechanism. And I want to give a case in point, the case of Gift Konjana and Dexter Nduna relating to Chegutu West constituency. ZEC admitted that Konjana won the election, but there were numbers challenges there, and his votes had been allocated to Dexter Nduna. But ZEC then said, we are hamstrung, we can't do anything about it, we can't correct the outcome, notwithstanding the fact that they corrected some also outcomes in relation to the presidential ballot itself. But then they left it to court to then determine this dispute. But to date, there's not been a judgment delivered in respect of that particular challenge. We still have Nduna sitting in parliament and enjoying parliamentary perks. We have a loser who is representing that constituency. And I've also alluded to the fact that we have had judgments which have not been delivered, in particular the 2002 presidential election petition, whose outcome might never be known. Yes, but there are, as you say, opportunities. The opportunity we have is that we are still 2 years before the elections, which are due in 2023. So we still have an opportunity for electoral reforms, and a new electoral law altogether. And again, an opportunity to work on our culture, particularly the culture to really respect our own laws, the culture to treat others equally. We still have an opportunity to relook at some of the laws, apart from the electoral law itself, that have an impact on the way we conduct elections, such as the IPA and the revised, and perhaps we may need to revisit the Maintenance of Peace and Order Act MOPA, which succeeded POSA. But when you look at the provisions that are in MOPA, they are more draconian than the ones that were in the POSA. So we need to revisit some of those laws. But again, most importantly, it's the apathy that we experience in our country, which we need to work on. Many of our youths are not interested in deciding for themselves who their leaders ought to be. They do not register to vote. They do not vote. So we need an inclusive and intensive voter education to deal with some of the problems we face as a country. But I think chiefly it is indeed a cultural change that we must embrace.
Okay, Mr. Makoni, before we move to the voter apathy of the youth, we are about to get there. I have one question for you. You know, a colleague of mine, Anachida Chikombo, he has a book TV program where he holds similar interviews like the one that we are having right now. And he once interviewed Professor Jonathan Moyo on his book, Excelgate, how the 2018 elections were rigged. And Professor Jonathan Moyo alleged or made an argument that when it comes to Zimbabwe, we have one of the most progressive electoral laws. So it's not really an issue of emphasizing on electoral reforms, but rather on the conduct of elections. Do you agree with that assertion?
I partly agree with him that yes, we do have, firstly, a very good constitution, and we have a progressive electoral act in the sense that over the years, there have been attempts to align that particular electoral act with, standards that we have in the region, in the SADC guidelines on democratic elections and the AU guidelines. So there are attempts really to align, our electoral laws with those, but we're still not there yet. But what I agree with Professor Moyo is the fact that whilst we may have perfect documents or good documents like our constitution and a very progressive electoral act, it is the culture of respecting provisions that are in the act which is lacking. Where there's talk about equality in the voting process. There's talk about equal access to the media, but what we see is the opposite. It means that somehow we are not respecting our own laws. So we need, a paradigm shift. We need to start, respecting those laws that govern elections for our elections to work.
Oh, wonderful. There you have it, our viewers. It's not so much about the laws. The laws, indeed, like what Professor Jonathan Moyo said, we have some wonderful laws in terms of looking at the region. The problem is there is a yawning gap between practice and the laws themselves. Dr. Mangani, who's watching right now, he's watching from Pretoria, South Africa, has a question that he sent us for you. He says, Section 45 of the Electoral Act provides that an individual may be elected to parliament on a party ticket. And Section 129 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe provides an allowance for parties to recall MPs at their pleasure. These sections, he says, are silent on the role of the ordinary public member that elect these individuals. And yet there is no criterion for recall. In such ambiguity, what is ZESN doing to strengthen people's vote and safeguard their interests to ensure that MPs do not toe the party line, but rather act in the interest of the public?
Well, I relate to Dr. Mangami's frustration. I share his disappointment. It is baffling that an elected member of parliament or councillor elected on a party ticket of one political party can be removed by another political party which participated separately in the election without recourse to the constituency which voted the MP in. This has been happening. We've seen the recourse that have been taking place over the last 12 months, which has left at least 30 vacant seats in parliament. And this has affected constituencies who are left without representation. The provision allows the expulsion of representatives because they no longer serve the interests of their political party, not because they no longer represent the interests of the nation. This does not motivate citizens to take part in elections and will lead to voter apathy, especially among the youth. It forces representatives to be loyal to their respective political parties and not the electorate. As long as officials are loyal to their political parties and not the electorate, citizens will be disinclined to engage in electoral processes. This, in a way, explains the current apathy, as very few individuals, especially those who are turning 18, are registering to vote. Only last month, we hear that 2 people registered to vote in Bulawayo, which is a serious cause of concern. When a person is voted into office, he is either sponsored by a political party or participates as an independent candidate. But once he or she is voted into office, she now represents the whole constituency, those who voted for her and those who voted for other candidates. His or her removal must therefore interest the whole constituency, which must be consulted. So we as ZESN are advocating for the total removal of the recall provision, or its motivation, what I would call modification, yes, to allow for the participation of the constituency in decision-making relating to the recalls. Recalls must be always citizen-driven, where the voices of the electorate are taken into account. Recalls must never be left to the selfish political party interests.
Just still on that issue, I think it's a very important issue because I think it has contributed a lot to derailing the democratic agenda. Because look, like what he's rightly pointing out, we have so many people that were recalled from parliament, yet they were elected into office by the constituency. So besides that aspect, there's somebody who was also concerned, his name is Walter. He was also asking, what is ZESN doing right now? Because like you rightly said, we are running out of time. What are the projects or programs that you're doing to ensure that these elections will be free, fair, and credible?
Well, we carry out a number of programs throughout the electoral cycle. As you know, that elections are a cycle. There is no defined start or end period. So we're always engaging throughout the electoral cycle. So in terms of what ZESN is doing to ensure that we improve the democratic space as we gravitate towards elections, I've already alluded to the fact that we are working on issues of the electoral reforms. But what I want to say is that immediately after the 2018 elections, ZESN and its partners in the civic society prepared a petition to Parliament calling upon Parliament to pass legislation to give effect and life to the 2013 Constitution and to review the electoral law. In particular, we called upon Parliament to set up an inclusive electoral reform committee to deliberate on political, administrative, and other reforms that are required, to enhance the credibility of our elections in Zimbabwe. We then followed that up with a compilation of about 223 recommendations, which were made by the various, observer missions who observed our elections, both local and international, into a compendium for ease access of stakeholders. We presented this compendium to ZEC as well as to Parliament sometime in 2019 and shared the same with stakeholders. We were then invited by Parliament, the Portfolio Committee on Justice, to a workshop to deliberate on the petition which we had submitted to them in December of 2018. At that particular workshop, we then tasked to draft suggested provisions or amendments to the Electoral Act. And together with our partners, we worked on those amendments, consulting widely, and then presented a draft to Parliament. So this is what we've been doing in terms of the electoral reforms. Once we presented that draft, the Speaker of Parliament himself was quite impressed with the work that had been done, and then decided that perhaps we needed a whole new electoral bill, and again tasked ZESN and its partners to work on a new electoral bill. So we did that and submitted a draft bill in September of 2020. This draft bill, incorporates those recommendations that were made by the various observer missions I have made reference to. And we are hoping that if 80% of a suggested electoral is embraced and become law, would have significantly dealt with some of the challenges that are bedeviling our elections. You will also perhaps have read that recently Pollard had a meeting in Nyanga where we were also called upon to discuss the draft electoral law with the political parties that were present there. And, quite a few of the provisions were accepted by the political parties, while they had reservations on other provisions. But we are back to the drawing board again to relocate those provisions and then perhaps motivate that what we are suggesting is not, out of this world, is something which will improve our elections. We have also been contacting political parties themselves, selling the contents of this draft act. And hopefully, if it is adopted, it will go a long way in ensuring that we have better elections in future. As you also know, it was announced recently that there will be a census, and soon after that census in 2022, there will be the delimitation exercise of delimiting constituent boundaries, which will then be used for the 2023 elections. As ZESN, we are engaging with ZEC and other stakeholders to ensure that that process produces right-sized constituencies that will be representative in the country, so that we do not have in future some constituencies that are smaller than others. We also, around the same theme, also are activating our, the voter education exercise, so that at least as the delimitation exercise is taking place, also we are urging voters to register to vote, so that the numbers that we then get during that exercise would then define the constituent boundaries that we will have for the 2023 elections. We are disappointed that this exercise has been given 3 months from October 2022 to December 2022, which we believe is too little to come up with good electoral boundaries. So we continue to engage with ZEC, to engage with government to ensure that at least the delimitation exercise starts early. In other countries which are going to conduct elections like Zambia, that delimitation exercise occurred or took place and was completed at least for the elections that are coming in August 2021, in a few months' time. So we hope that we can learn from other countries and draw our boundaries well in time. David, you must also know that in terms of our law, if the delimitation exercise occurs within 6 months before the election that then is oncoming, the boundaries that emerge from that exercise will then not be used for the election that is coming. So if, for instance, the result of the delimitation exercise or the delimitation exercise is completed in January 2023, and elections are to be held in July 2023, it means that the results of the delimitation exercise may not, the constituencies that would have been defined may not be used for the 2023 elections, which will be something very disappointing if that happens, because we'll then remain with constituencies that have been causing problems that are not right-sized, as we have seen in the 2018 2018 elections.
Mr. Makoni, you have been talking about voter apathy, serious, alarming voter apathy among the youth, among Zimbabweans in general. What do you reckon to be the factors behind such voter apathy in Zimbabwe?
Well, chief amongst them will be the contested elections, which are very discouraging. Many see no point in voting, as their votes will not count. Contested elections often give this impression that elections are being stolen, and therefore there's no point in voting. So it discourages a lot of people from participating. We have also seen or heard that people saying that we continue to vote, but that has not changed our situation. We continue to wallow in poverty. Economically, we continue to go. We continue to deteriorate as a country, but we are having these elections and election promises at each and every turn. Politicians, to many, are seen as just being interested in power retention and not in delivery itself. So year in, year out, political parties promise a lot of things. They promise heaven on earth, but the minute they go into power, as the lingo goes from our youth, dololo, nothing happens, nothing is done. No delivery. The promises that are in manifestos of political parties, are ignored soon after the results. It will be again a new period of campaigning for the next election. I'm sure you've heard that soon after the 2018 elections, as ZANU-PF officials, going around saying that we already have a candidate for the 2023 elections. And that is not about candidacy for the 2023 elections. It's about going down to business, delivering for the nation and not being fixated on power retention. So our challenge really is power retention. And this discourages a lot of people. Our youth not employed, they are hustling every day and focusing on election, which does not change their situation, is to them an unnecessary distraction to their daily hustle or daily activity. So those are some of the reasons. But of course, our elections witness a lot of violence and intimidation, and so it discourages, especially our women, because they can't stand the violence, they can't stand the intimidation, and they are then kept away from participating as voters as well as candidates in elections. So we do have a lot that causes this apathy. But you all know as well that a significant number of our population is actually disenfranchised. The diaspora, people living in the diaspora are disenfranchised. If that number is participating in our elections, we'll have lots of people voting. But the over 3.5 million people living outside of Zimbabwe have no right to vote and do not appear to be getting that opportunity, especially if what we hear in the public domain is anything to go by. Statements like until sanctions are removed, we will not give the right to vote to people in the diaspora, as if it is those people in the diaspora, Zimbabweans in the diaspora, that really impose the sanctions targeted or otherwise on the people of Zimbabwe. Then, of course, we have had these recalls that have been taking place, where we have unelected individuals dislodging the elected from parliament. So people then say, what is the point of voting when the people we elect are then removed by their political parties without recourse to us? So this again will account for a lot of apathy towards the 2023 elections. So we really need to go back to the drawing board. We need to convince our people that in voting, you have your destiny on your hands, which is a very difficult thing under the current environment. We need to intensify voter education and convince new voters to register, and even convince them more to actually exercise their right to vote. I do not believe that we've been doing enough, especially at this point, encouraging people to register to vote. We have not been doing much, and I urge us to do more, particularly ZEC to conduct publicity blitz, road shows, and the like to encourage people to register to vote.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Makoni. But I'm really concerned about this issue of voter apathy. There are some people that are doing quite well, like when we talk about Hope Chimono and people like Gift Ostalos, the general of the MDC Alliance. They've been doing quite a good job to try and encourage the youth to register to vote. Maybe from your side, what has been ZESN doing also in terms of trying to water away or push against that voter apathy?
We continue to conduct our voter education. We continue to encourage people to register and vote. And in the next coming months, as people prepare for the delimitation exercise, we'll also be increasing our campaign towards that. We do have representatives in every constituency in the country who are task force representatives of ZESN, who continue to engage on the ground and encouraging people to register and vote. Of course, the only challenge we have had is that under the COVID-19 guidelines, meetings have not been happening for the most of times since last year, and it is therefore very difficult to reach out to other people who may not necessarily have access to technology. But what we've also been doing is that using the expansive bus networks, those buses that you go into the rural communities, we have been delivering our publications wherein we are encouraging people to register and vote through buses, and we're hoping that those publications will then be distributed, particularly in the rural areas, so that people can get to know what is happening and how they can also participate in the improvement of our electoral environment, and why it is important for them to continue to register and vote, notwithstanding the challenges that we face in the country. So we continue to do a lot, and we've been also encouraging ZEC to start rolling out its own voter campaign, wherein we will, as we have done in the past, be complementing their efforts. We have also been having monthly radio broadcasts where we talk about election issues. And one of the issues that we have been talking about, particularly in some of these radio stations that speak to our communities, like Radio Zimbabwe, we have monthly broadcasts there where we share notes around electoral activities, including encouraging people to register and vote. So this is, in a nutshell, what we are doing as an organization. Of course, we could do more. We want to do more, but we are restricted by the current lockdown regulations.
Unfortunately, it appears that this current pandemic environment is really limiting a lot of things. And it's also very unfortunate that a lot of political, should I say, politicking has also been happening. Some political parties and political actors have really been taking advantage of this kind of environment. Nevertheless, we are now running out of time. Mr. Makoni, it was good having you, but before you go, you're going to have to submit some recommendations to the people of Zimbabwe as they fast approach these very important 2023 elections.
Oh, thank you to Zimbabweans across the world, particularly those in the country who will be able to vote in the 2023 elections and who may vote in the by-elections should they be called. We continue to encourage you to register and vote. To vote is to exist. You can only make a difference when you vote, even if that difference is marginal. You can make a difference by registering to vote and then going out to vote. When we are apathetic, the minority will vote for us. And those leaders we do not want, leaders who would not have made it had we voted, will be in charge of our lives. So voting is important as putting food into our mouths. Your life needs your vote. Your country needs your vote. Your vote today will shape future generations, but your apathy today will be a curse to future generations.
Solomonic words, Mr. Makoni. Thank you for coming to the show. Looking forward to have you again in the future. But for now, goodbye. Thank you so much, our viewers and listeners, for joining us. Do not forget to follow us on all our social media platforms. And do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Till we meet again, it is bye-bye for now. God bless you.